The meeting will come to order. We have 13 nominees on today's agenda. I ask members please take seats. 4 nominees have been listed for the first time and will be held over at the request of the minority. They are Beth Robinson, nominated to the Second Circuit; Jennifer Sung, nominated to the Ninth Circuit; Rahul Gupta, nominated to be Director of National Drug Control Policy; and Elizabeth Prelogard, nominated to be Solicitor General. We also have 8 U.S. Attorney nominees listed for the first time. I understand that we can vote on these 8 by voice vote en bloc, and we will do so after members have an opportunity to make remarks. We have 1 additional U.S. Attorney nominee eligible for a vote today, Rachel Rollins for the District of Massachusetts. I understand the minority has requested a roll call vote on Ms. Rollins' nomination, and I'd like to address the committee precedents around U.S. Attorney nominees and speak about Ms. Rollins and her record for a moment. The longstanding precedent in this committee is to voice vote U.S. Attorney nominees. Under the Trump administration, 85 U.S. attorneys were approved with no record vote. Only 3 nominees were held over 1 week, but there was no record vote asked of any of the nominees on the Republican side under President Trump. Based on a review of materials, the committee has only ever held a roll call vote on 3 U.S. attorneys, 1 in 1993, 1 in 1982, and another in 1975. That longstanding precedent, nearly 30 years since the last roll call vote, reflects a number of realities. It reflects the deference to the administration in filling the executive branch appointments. It reflects respect for role of home state senators in helping choose these chief law enforcement officers. And it reflects an understanding of the vital role that U.S. attorneys play in our justice system. During the Trump administrations, Democrats respected that precedent out of comedy and courtesy and enduring belief that there should be norms in every institution. This committee processed those 85 U.S. attorney nominees under President Trump. All 85 received a voice vote, no recorded opposition. 2 of those U.S. attorneys were in the state of Arkansas. 2 of the U.S. attorneys were in the state of Iowa, 3 U.S. attorneys in Louisiana, 2 in Missouri, 1 in Nebraska, 3 in North Carolina, 2 in South Carolina, 3 in Tennessee, 4 in Texas, and 1 in Utah. Democrats supported these nominees. Democrats agreed to voice votes, and Democrats deferred to home state Republicans, even where Democrats had fundamental issues with the nominee's record or ideology. Consider the example of Brian Keister, nominated to the Eastern District of Oklahoma. Mr. Keister vocally opposed an Oklahoma ballot measure that made simple drug possession a misdemeanor. He did so even after nearly 60% of Oklahoma voters approved the measure. Numerous Democrats on this committee have supported making simple drug possession a misdemeanor, yet not a single Democratic member opposed Mr. Keister's nomination. Instead, we defer to the Trump administration, Senators Inhofe and Lankford, and move the nominee by unanimous voice vote. So why are the committee Republicans abandoning or wish to abandon a 30-year precedent? They claim it's rooted in Ms. Rollins' record. Let's take a look at it. From 2007 to 2011, Ms. Rollins was an assistant U.S. attorney in Massachusetts. She started in the office's civil division. She served on a small trial attorney team that handled civil commitment trials for sexually dangerous persons. As Ms. Rollins notes in her judiciary questionnaire, every case I prosecuted resulted in a sexually dangerous person remaining detained, rendering them unable to reoffend and cause harm. She then went on to prosecute money laundering in both civil and criminal health care, fraud, and procurement. After leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ms. Rollins served in a number of senior posts with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and Port Authority. In 2018, Ms. Rollins was elected to serve as District Attorney of Suffolk County. In that capacity, she leads an office of 150 lawyers who collectively handle 25,000 new criminal case filings and 1,000 criminal investigations annually. Under her watch, the office's homicide unit has seen a 21% increase in completed trials, and that unit has supervised more than 165 legacy unsolved homicide cases. Notably, homicides in Boston declined by 31% in 2019 after Ms. Rollins took office, making it the lowest number in decades. With Ms. Rollins at the helm, investigations by multiple units in the office have likewise increased. The homicide unit increased investigations by 44%, the major felony unit by 22%, the human trafficking exploitation unit by 19%, the special prosecution unit by 33%. Throughout her tenure as Suffolk County District Attorney, Ms. Rollins has worked closely with law enforcement to keep neighborhoods safe, to rebuild trust between police and the community, and to pursue justice for crime victims. And so it's a little surprised that she supports this, she enjoys the support of law enforcement leaders in her state, even those who don't always agree with her. Listen to what the Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins wrote to our committee about her. Rollins has shown herself to be a fierce defender for survivors of homicide, domestic violence, sexual assault and trafficking, child abuse, and other crimes, not only in her dogged pursuit of justice for them and accountability by their assailants, but also by establishing practices that provide victims with the support and resources necessary to begin the long and arduous process of healing. 8 law enforcement leaders in Suffolk County, including both a retired and acting commissioner of the Boston Police Department, wrote to this committee and said, at a time when we are working to generate greater trust between all law enforcement communities we serve, DA Rollins has proven that she's committed to meeting this moment in history. I think the controversy obviously has to do with her prosecution priorities as a Suffolk County District Attorney. The claim that Ms. Rollins has declined to prosecute drug crimes is false. Rollins' policy allows prosecution for nonviolent drug offenses, including possession with intent to distribute. The policy does establish a presumption of non-prosecution, but that is rebuttable. Before declining to prosecute possession with intent to distribute, prosecutors consider whether this is a first offense or if there are like offenses. According to Rollins, her office still prosecutes 25% of cases for which there is a rebuttable non-prosecution presumption, including possession with intent to distribute, disorderly conduct, and driving with a suspended license. Rollins' policies have not led to a crime increase. According to a July 2021 Boston Globe article, violent crimes, including homicides, rapes, and robberies, were down 17% in 2021 relative to the previous year. As Suffolk County District Attorney, Rollins has established a declination and diversion policy for 15 crimes. Pursuant to this policy, there is a presumption of non-prosecution for crimes like trespass, shoplifting, larceny, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, receiving stolen property, and others. According to Rollins, this policy reflects 2 goals: reduce the footprint of the criminal justice system where it served no public safety interest, and to allocate more of our prosecution resources to the serious crimes that harm people, families, and the community as a whole. She has not established a simple non-prosecution policy, including for the possession with the intent to distribute, which I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about this morning. Rather, she's established a rebuttable presumption of non-prosecution that considers factors like a pattern of similar offenses, and in the case of possession with intent to distribute, indicia of intent to distribute beyond mere quantity. The evidence also makes clear that Rollins' office has in fact prosecuted drug crimes, including fentanyl-related cases. Rollins' office recently obtained indictments for crimes including trafficking in fentanyl, possession of fentanyl with intent to distribute, and possession with intent to distribute both cocaine and buprenorphine. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Here's the bottom line. We are in a national conversation about prosecution, what works and what doesn't work. It went so far as this committee passed a major change in sentencing when it came to certain crimes, and it was signed into law by President Trump, the First Step Act. It really raised the same question which she has raised. Where should we draw the line in terms of prosecutorial discretion, in terms of judicial discretion? And there are efforts underway to make sure we come up with some wisdom in that decision. She has stepped out with good results, and I support her nomination. We have an opportunity to uphold the norms and traditions of this committee by supporting Ms. Rollins. Comedy is a two-way street, and I hope my colleagues will rethink an approach that departs from a 30-year precedent and fails to recognize the support Ms. Rollins has and her unquestionable qualifications for the job. With that, I turn to Ranking Member Grassley.
I'm going to reserve my time to use during that debate, so you can proceed as you want to proceed for now.
Thank you. Before proceeding to consider Ms. Rollins' nomination, I understand we can proceed with an unblocked voice vote on the 8 U.S. attorneys listed for the first time today. Does anyone seek recognition to speak on those nominees? If not, on favorably reporting the nominations of Jessica Aber, Carla Friedman, William Eilenfeld, Christopher Kavanaugh, Darcy McElwee, Breon Peace, William Thompson, and Damian Williams be U.S. attorneys, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The majority of
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recorded as a no on all the nominees.
You will be so recorded, Senator from Missouri. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, the ayes have it. The nominations will be favorably reported to the floor. As I noted in my opening remarks, the minority has requested a roll call vote on Rachel Rollins' nomination to be the U.S. District Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. Before proceeding, do any members seek recognition to speak? The senator from Arkansas is recognized. Senator, do you have your mic on? There you go. Thank you.
So I want to respond to some of the points that Senator Durbin made last week and this week. As he said, 3 times in the Trump administration, U.S. attorneys were held over. So there is precedent for that. There are 3 times in which the committee's had roll call votes on U.S. attorneys. It's been 28 years. So I acknowledge that while there is precedent, it is rare, it's unusual. But I also have to say it's also rare for the president to nominate a radical pro-criminal prosecutor for a U.S. attorney position. Rachel Rollins is the very epitome of a Soros prosecutor. It's generous to call her a prosecutor at all. For those who may not know what the term means, Soros prosecutor refers to the wave of so-called progressive political activists who in the last 5 years, backed by wealthy liberal mega donors like George Soros, have run for local district attorney positions throughout the country with the express purpose of igniting revolution and destroying our criminal justice system from within. Rollins, like San Francisco's Chesa Boudin and Philadelphia's Larry Krasner and Los Angeles' George Gascon, are out to destroy the criminal justice system from within. That's not hyperbole. That's not my language. She literally said in an event last year when she was speaking about what she calls an unjust criminal justice system, that her purpose as a prosecutor is to, quote, dismantle it from the inside, end quote. In March 2019, shortly after being sworn in as district attorney, Rollins also said in an interview that she was, quote, going to battle against the U.S. attorney over 3 areas where she didn't think we should be prosecuting criminals at all: immigration, marijuana, and opioids. Let that sink in. The local district attorney decided that her mission was going to be to try to stop the United States attorney from doing his job and enforcing the law on matters like opioids. Now she wants to be given that job. In an effort to indict our entire criminal justice system as hopelessly beyond saving, Rollins, just like Boudin and Krasner, created what they called a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission. In founding that organization, they wrote the following, quote, "The thing we call the justice system in the United States has been a cruel and oppressive force of injustice for all marginalized communities." Ms. Rollins went on to say, quote, "This isn't a bug in the system, but a feature. It's operating exactly the way it was designed and built to function." An indictment of the very criminal justice system she now seeks to lead on behalf of the United States. But she's not just saying crazy things. She's put her pro-criminal agenda into practice. Even before she became a district attorney in Boston, she put out a list of 15 crimes that, by default, she will not allow her prosecutors to pursue without supervisor approval. That list includes things like trespassing, disorderly conduct, breaking and entering, malicious destruction of property, threats, resisting arrest, and even drug trafficking. She has issued that list as the do not prosecute directive once she took office. That's right. In the midst of a national drug crisis with more than 90,000 of our fellow Americans killed by a drug overdose in the last year alone, Joe Biden's nominee for U.S. Attorney openly says that she does not believe that we should prosecute drug possession with intent to distribute of subjects like fentanyl and heroin. Rollins likes to claim that avoiding prosecution for criminals makes them less likely to be prosecuted for crimes in the future. Circular reasoning, akin to closing your eyes to crime before excitedly declaring that you see no crime at all. But the fact that violent crime in Boston was decreasing before Rollins became DA, and now it's increased ever since. In 2020, Boston homicides increased by 38%. Drug crimes have increased as well. It's not surprising then that Rollins' jurisdiction has seen enormous increases in drug overdose deaths since she's been in office. When Rachel Rollins first became the district attorney for Suffolk County in 2019, opioid overdose deaths in Suffolk County were declining. Since then, the county's opioid overdose deaths have become the fastest growing overdose death numbers in Massachusetts, far outpacing the neighboring counties in and around Boston. Ms. Rollins appears to measure success as a prosecutor not by how many victims and innocent people she protects, but rather by how many criminals she keeps from facing consequences. If she's confirmed as the U.S. Attorney, the cartels and the gangs that are fueling violence and death in our communities will be gleeful. If Rachel Rollins wants to advocate for criminals to be released instead of for the law to be enforced, there's a place for her in our government. It's called the Public Defender's Office. But with Rollins as a prosecutor in name only, the criminals have two advocates in the courtroom, the prosecution and the defense, while the victims of crime would have none. And finally, I just want to mention that it's not just her radical pro-crime stances that make her unsuited for this office. She also appears to have a serious lack of judgment and temperament problems as well. In one totally bizarre episode, Boston media reported an apparent instance of road rage by Ms. Rollins in a shopping mall parking lot on Christmas Eve last year. According to a complaint filed with the Boston Police Department against Ms. Rollins, she tried to use her SUV to force another vehicle out of the merge lane, threatened to write the driver a ticket, turned on her sirens, which I don't know why a prosecutor has in the first place, and then sped off through a red light. Then, when a local news crew tried to ask Ms. Rollins about the incident 2 weeks later, she responded by threatening the news crew on video, saying, quote, "I'll call the police on you and make an allegation, and we'll see how that works with you." She later tried to justify this by saying she thought the news camera was a weapon. It is a truly bizarre case. It's just another example of how far outside the mainstream this nominee is. Her personal judgment is in question, but there's no question that her professional judgment is terrible. So while I will grant that it is unusual to have a recorded vote in this committee or on the floor, it is also unusual for President Biden to have submitted as a nominee to be the United States Attorney who consistently sides with criminals. And our responsibility as a United States Senator is to ensure that we do not confirm pro-criminal activists into the office of United States Attorney.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll recognize the senator from Iowa after I ask for unanimous consent to put into the record an article from March 29th, 2021. I believe it was in, I thought it was in Boston Globe, but I may be wrong. It's WBUR News. It's entitled, "Not Prosecuting Low-Level Crimes Leads to Less Crime in Suffolk County, Research Finds." Research by Rutgers University, among others. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. I think Ms. Rollins, under freedom of speech, can advocate transforming the criminal justice system, but as U.S. Attorney, I think her only responsibility is to carry out existing law. As Suffolk County District Attorney, Ms. Rollins announced that her office would not charge 15 types of offices including threats, larceny, and trespass, just to name a few. Every prosecutor has prosecutorial discretion, what to do and not do. I think what's wrong with the way she handled what she wanted to accomplish was just speaking out about it and more or less telling people, if you commit these crimes, you won't be charged. And she could have had that in her mind, not said anything about it, used prosecution discretion as she wanted to, because that's what every prosecutor has to do. But no, it seems to me like she encouraged people to know what they could do or not do and avoid prosecution. I think that encourages the wrong kind of activity in our society. Now, I had a chance to ask her a question. She told me, when I asked her about all this stuff, she told me that, quote, there were no criminal offenses that her office declined to charge categorically, and that her office has prosecuted over 25% of these crimes when the facts and circumstances justify doing so. That means that 75% of the time in that county, if you threaten somebody, steal, violate someone's property, commit other crimes, you won't be charged. If we were to go along as U.S. senators with this philosophy, we can expect that President Biden might nominate like-minded individuals to other U.S. attorneys' positions in the country, and it seems to me we don't want to go in that direction. Prosecutors publishing a list of crimes they don't plan to prosecute encourage people to break those laws. So that's where I stand on this nominee. Now is not the time to nominate a prosecutor of this type who does not want to enforce the law. I yield.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Booker seeks recognition.
Thank you very much. I listened intently to my colleagues in describing someone as a pro-criminal activist and radically pro-criminal. And it is serious accusations. Those are dramatic languages that somebody is seeking to be pro-criminal, to be radical, the word revolution, igniting revolution. And so with such serious accusations, it makes me wonder what the truth of them is. Well, I'll tell you this, and I respect my colleague from Arkansas, but if these things were true, why does she have Republican leaders that are not from Arkansas but are from her community that are writing to this committee testifying? Republican leaders. They're not pro-criminal. They're not pro-criminal activists. They're not radical. They're not igniting revolutions. They know the candidate. And they have worked with her. And they have given her support. Law enforcement leaders. Some of them I note of both parties, who swore an oath, who are members of this community, who see what this person does. They didn't write in saying, stop the radical revolutionary, stop the radical pro-criminal, stop the pro-criminal activist. They wrote to testify to her commitment to public safety. Fellow prosecutors, again, of different philosophical backgrounds, wrote to this committee, who actually know her, who have met her, who have worked alongside of her, are not using sweeping language saying that she's trying to ignite a revolution. They are testifying to her qualifications. I know we have extreme language for each other sometimes, but who am I going to trust? Republicans from that community? And so this is what gets me right now. I have yet to meet someone in this country in this body, in police officers, prosecutors who are pro-crime. I know we all live in different backgrounds. I live in a community where there's shootings on my street. I had a murder around the corner from me, about 700 yards from where I live, just this past summer. And what I often wonder is, we may have different ideas about how to go about this, but I know the facts. Right across the street from me is a drug treatment center. I go sit with the folks and listen to their stories. I look at the waste of taxpayer money. I see person after person after person telling me of the dozens of times they've been arrested for low-level drug crimes. Dozens of times. Because they are addicted to these substances. Is that justice for our community, cycling people through the criminal justice system? Because that's the oath. The oath that we want from prosecutors is to create public safety, to advocate for justice, not just to take low-income people and churn them into a system that spits them out worse than they were before. So I'm sorry, is it radical to say our criminal justice system is severely broken? Well, 88 senators of this body said it was broken and worked in a bipartisan way to fix things like this. People on both sides of the aisle advocate for more treatment and less incarceration. I've heard the accusations of this person, but I know the facts. You just quoted the study. I could quote hundreds of them from think tanks on both sides of the aisle that point to the fact that we in this nation declared a drug war in the 60s, became the incarceration capital of the planet Earth, and didn't win this drug war. And so God bless people who have a different approach and are showing measurable evidence-based results. So yeah, this breaks precedents. But I'm sorry, when you have local Republican leaders, local law enforcement, local prosecutors all testifying to this committee of this person, that does not hold up. That this person is the hyperbolic statements, radically pro-criminal, seeking to ignite a revolution, pro-criminal activists, out to destroy the criminal justice system. That just doesn't hold water. That sounds like rhetoric that does not meet reality. You may disagree with my views on criminal justice, but someone who has dedicated their entire career to making their community safer, they deserve better. You may disagree with their policies, but to attack their character when others of both parties testify to their qualifications for this job, I just don't think that's worth breaking a 28-year precedent in this committee. I just believe we can do better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Leahy, we have requests to speak from Senator Kennedy on the Republican side, Senator Coons on the Democratic side, as well as Senator Feinstein and yourself. What's that? Senator Hirono, I'm sorry. She was earlier on the list after Coons and before Senator Feinstein. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I talked to Senator Warren on the Senate floor at length about Ms. Rollins, and she asked me to go back and meaning Senator Warren, and take a close look at Ms. Rollins' record and background, and I have. Based on what I've seen, I think it is clear that there was a list, and is a list, that Ms. Rollins created that indicates a preference against prosecuting people for certain crimes. I understand that it's not a hard and fast rule, it's a rebuttable presumption. And if the good people of Suffolk agree with that under our system of federalism, that's their business. When we're dealing with federal law, though, of course, it becomes our business. And I know that we normally, at least I normally, almost always defer to my colleagues on U.S. attorney picks. On this one, I can't, and I wanted to explain why. This is America. You're entitled to believe what you want. I believe in free will and responsibility, and I think it's a founding principle in our society. You know, on my bad days, I agree with Sartre when he said men are free and human life begins on the far side of despair. Today, he would say women and men, people. That doesn't mean that there aren't mitigating factors for people's behavior. And people are complex. There are a multitude of reasons for our behavior. But ultimately, no matter how we're feeling or what's going on in our lives, we're responsible for our actions. We have to be. Society can't function without that guiding principle. And I sense from reading about Ms. Rollins that I think she would disagree with me. And I do think our system is set up to take into consideration mitigating factors, but not in terms of whether you have committed the crime. The mitigating factors come into play in terms of punishment. And I think that, honestly, Ms. Rollins does disagree with me, and I respect that. But what I think doesn't matter, and what she thinks doesn't matter, what matters is federal law. And I think federal law is very clear. You can't have any kind of list or preference for not prosecuting a crime that Congress has delineated a crime. And I just wanted to make that clear about why I'm going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. So next, Senator Coons, Hirono, Feinstein, Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone who was responsible for the second largest law enforcement agency in my state as county executive before coming to this job, and as someone who has worked diligently with partners of both parties and continues to do so on criminal justice reform, I just want to speak for a moment about what the impact may be of this kind of tone, this kind of trajectory of attack on the record and the character of someone who, from what I read about her service and record, is demonstrably not a radical, pro-criminal Soros prosecutor. Both you and other members of the committee have entered a series of rebuttals, if I might, just on the specific point that Senator Kennedy was just walking through. The idea that Ms. Rollins declines to prosecute drug crimes, including for fentanyl, is just inaccurate. She has a demonstrated commitment to addressing the impacts of drug trafficking and violent crime in Suffolk County. And to be clear, I'll submit for the record a whole series of documents about arrests and indictments by the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, which she leads, for charges related to trafficking in fentanyl and heroin, distribution of fentanyl, possession of the substance with intent to distribute, and others. So, in my view, it is a gross mischaracterization to say that she simply is pro-criminal and refuses to prosecute. The list of offenses, as discussed a moment ago by Senator Kennedy, is merely a rebuttable presumption within the office of the district attorney that you should consider whether there's an intent to distribute beyond mere quantity, whether it's a first offense. And I think in this era when we are trying, some of us, to move forward criminal justice reform, it makes sense to recognize that resources in law enforcement and in prosecution are limited, and reasoned judgments about when to dedicate those resources to prosecuting things like trespassing or destruction of property is a responsible way to manage a district attorney's office if the results, as you have already said, Mr. Chairman, are actually a reduction in crime. First. Second, over a long period of time on this committee, across our country, at the county and state level and the federal level. Constant badgering, berating law enforcement leaders, prosecutors for doing anything other than charging the highest level of offense is what got us into the place of being the country that incarcerated more of its citizens than almost any other country in the world, and where it had a distinct and disparate impact on black and brown communities. So I just think some of the tone, as well as the breaking of precedent and the way this is being highlighted, runs directly against what I was hoping to see this committee do in terms of making progress. Last, if someone were to be nominated for the position of U.S. Attorney from my state, I would hope my colleagues would listen to folks with relevant experience who might be indicative of a rejection of their record if it were as it's been mischaracterized. So let me just briefly cite from 3 of the many letters that are available in the record before us. One's from a graduate of both Harvard College and Harvard Law School, a seasoned and experienced leader in the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth. He was Assistant Attorney General under President Clinton. And he says, I've known Rachel for many years as a lawyer in the Boston area legal community, an appointee in our administration when I was governor, as a district attorney, and cites her reputation for integrity, earnestness, candor, determination, hard work, and as a smart and effective servant leader who has dedicated herself to the cause of criminal justice. That's from a Democratic governor, Deval Patrick. Fine. Another governor says, I respectfully submit this letter in support of the nomination of Rachel Rollins. Goes on at great length about their deep knowledge together, their work together, and he says the District Attorney Rollins, who he knows well, is perfectly positioned to serve as a positive change agent in federal law enforcement. I have spent many hours discussing these issues, and I'm paraphrasing, he's referencing how you strike the right balance in prosecution to actually fight crime and promote justice. She will be, he concludes, a great U.S. attorney. Now that's Governor Bill Weld. Some of you have heard of Governor Bill Weld. He was the U.S. attorney in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. What president chose him? Ronald Reagan. He was the Assistant Attorney General of the United States for the Criminal Division. What president chose him? Ronald Reagan. Hardly a radical, Soros, pro-criminal person. Last letter I'd like to paraphrase. This is a letter that is signed by 8 different leaders. My father was from Boston. The idea that these 8 leaders would sign a letter in support of someone who was pro-criminal defies reason. I just read it at the top. By way of background, we have worked alongside DA Rollins during her entire tenure. We represent and lead the following law enforcement entities: the Boston Police Department, the Chelsea Police Department, the Massachusetts State Police, the MBTA Transit Police Department, the Revere Police Department, the Winthrop Police Department. I'll note that the State Police and the Boston Police are the 2 largest departments in the entire Commonwealth. They go through great detail about their long work with her. As is not surprising, they cite that sometimes they have disagreed. But they say, and I quote, she respects us and the work we do to keep our communities safe. At a time when we are working to generate greater trust between all law enforcement and communities we serve, DA Rollins has proven she's committed to meeting this moment. We support her nomination for the position of U.S. Attorney and look forward to working with her in this role. I find that it strains credibility that someone who is a pro-criminal radical would win the support of the leadership of police departments large and small across the state and of governors, former governors of both parties who previously served in law enforcement leadership. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to supporting her nomination for U.S. Attorney.
Before I recognize another Democratic senator, does any Republican senator wish to speak? Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To sit here and listen to the characterization of Rachel Rollins as a pro-criminal radical is, I think that's really quite insane, really, because I should think that we should care about facts and records, and when you characterize a person as a pro-criminal radical, it strains believability. The case has definitely not been made. Actually, I would like to have a U.S. attorney who actually thinks about what we should do in terms of prosecuting crimes. Not just, let's just prosecute everybody, you know? She came up with a list of, for declination and diversion policy for 15 crimes, all rebuttable. And why does she do this? Well, according to her, this policy reflects two goals, which I think does not make her a radical pro-criminal person. Two goals: to reduce the footprint of the criminal justice system where it served no public safety interest, and to allocate more of our prosecution resources to the serious offenses that harm people, families, and the community as a whole. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. That definitely doesn't sound like a pro-criminal radical. That makes her sound like a person who thinks about the resources that she would bring to bear. And in fact, crime has gone down. Serious crime has gone down in Boston where she worked. So, you know, when we make these kinds of, I would say, radical statements, why don't we try to back it up? And then, in addition, I sit here listening to my Republican colleagues always talk about the pattern and practice and tradition of this committee only when it suits their purposes. I wish that consistency was something that mattered to my Republican colleagues, but apparently not. And so here we go. You know, we have over 94 U.S. attorneys. Are we going to try and pick out people that we don't like, that we have concerns about, without giving the full picture? I hope not. Otherwise, we'd be here all year till next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. On the Democratic side, we have Senators Feinstein and Leahy and Klobuchar and Blumenthal. Any senators on the Republican side wish to be recognized? If not, Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I think these are always difficult moments when people raise points about people that are not in your area of the country. You seek to look through materials and find out what is evenly balanced and what you can trust. And I'd just like to read one of these letters from the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. And this is from Fred Tompkin, the Suffolk County Sheriff. I'm writing this to express my ardent support for the nomination of Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins to become the next United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. In full disclosure, when she first ran to replace our outgoing district attorney among a crowded field of candidates, I supported one of her competitors. I offer this advice to illustrate that while I didn't initially support her as a candidate for that office at the time, I ultimately did so in the general election. I have long since had the opportunity to witness firsthand through the interconnectedness of our offices as members of the law enforcement and criminal justice continuum, the thoughtful, innovative, and effective leadership that she has brought to the office and to the people of Suffolk County. She has earned my respect and perhaps even more importantly, my trust. Whether meeting on numerous occasions with my executive team at the department to discuss issues like substance use disorder, homelessness, mental health, and other critical issues, or visiting with the men and women in care and custody for heartfelt conversation about working together to help prevent their recidivism and keep their children from following them. D.A. Rollins has shown her deep commitment to all the citizens of Suffolk County. She has also shown herself to be a fierce defender for survivors of homicide, domestic violence, sexual assault and trafficking, child abuse, and other crimes, not only in her dogged pursuit of justice for them and accountability by their assailants, but also by establishing practices that provide victims with the support and resources necessary to begin the long and arduous process of healing. Her ability to excel as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Boston, Chelsea, Revere, Winthrop, Massachusetts, where she manages over 25,000 criminal cases per year across 9 districts and multiple courts: Suffolk Superior Court, the Massachusetts Appeals Court, the Supreme Judicial Court, and the Boston Juvenile Court, is a powerful confirmation of her abilities and her considerable expertise, particularly her service as former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts is proof positive of her qualifications to fulfill the new role. And it goes on and concludes, put simply, I believe that D.A. Rollins is the right person for the right time for the right job. And this is Sheriff Stephen Tompkins, Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Feinstein. Senator Leahy.
I think just about everything has been said, but I would note that a prosecutor's job is to use discretion. And I think the fact that so many law enforcement officials support her is that they know they have to use discretion. This idea that prosecute every single thing that comes up, that's impossible. Everybody knows that. The courts can't handle that. Nobody can. But you use discretion, you pick what's important. I did that when my 8 years when I was a prosecutor, and I was pleased that in 1974, when the National District Attorneys Association looked at 2,500 DAs across the country, they picked 3 of the DAs to point out as exemplary. I was one of the 3, and it's because I used discretion in my prosecution. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar and Blumenthal on the Democratic side. Are the others remaining? Senator Cruz, are you seeking recognition? Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar.
I appreciated the comments of my colleagues. I obviously will support this nominee, but I just hope we are not going down this road because you can have nominees for U.S. Attorney where perhaps in the past they found something about their background that disqualifies them in terms of their personal conduct. That's happened. But if we start examining every decision and just go on who we would want to have first in someone else's local area, we're going to have a huge problem. I was thinking back to my time as county attorney. I had to prosecute Kirby Puckett because it was right to do under the law, the biggest baseball star ever in the history of my state. And I guess that could have been used against me for something. I think back to when Attorney General McCasey contacted me when they had to have a switch in the U.S. attorneys in Minnesota. This is quite a long time. It was during the end of the Bush administration. And he gave me a name. It might not have been my first choice, but I had respect for this person. And I immediately said, because I knew the area, I'd been a prosecutor. And I said, yes, that's a good idea for this situation to put this person in as U.S. attorney. I then, during the Trump administration, when then Attorney General Sessions had reviewed one name with me, and I went and interviewed her. I didn't know her, and I checked her out with people in my state named Erica McDonald. I said, yeah, this is a good choice. And she did a good job. So that's the history here. My colleagues have done such a great job going through the facts about this nominee. I just want us to remember our role in our individual states, the roles of our colleagues, whether they be Republicans and Democrats in individual states, and just what this means if we start picking apart individual U.S. attorneys' nominees, because most of them, to get to the stage of being a U.S. attorney, most of them have been prosecutors, and they've had to make a ton of hard decisions, some which there is absolutely no way we would have all made the same decisions, no matter what party they were from. And I just want our colleagues to remember that as we vote on this nominee. And mostly I want us to remember, since We already have had this discussion as we look at other nominees in the future, that we consider this, whether we have a Republican president or a Democratic president. Thank you.
It's my understanding that Senator Cruz has told us he needs 15 minutes. And Senator Blumenthal seeks recognition as well. The Senate is set to open at 10.
9:30, I think.
And, pardon me?
That's what I got, that information last night. It was 9:30.
9:30? But you have to go to the floor?
I have to go to the floor by about 5 after.
5 after? So the question is whether we want to take the vote and then recognize the two individual senators to speak as long as they wish. Is there objection to that? If not, as I noted in my opening remarks, the minority has requested a roll call vote on Rachel Rollins' nomination to the U.S. Attorney for...
Mr. Chairman, I actually would like to speak before the vote because I would like what I'm saying to be considered when people are casting their votes.
Of course, the senator has a right. I hope he will recognize that there are colleagues of his who need to go to the floor. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think clarity is a good thing in politics and life. I think transparency is a good thing in politics and life. All of us, when we go back to our states, our constituents are interested in what we support and what we stand for. The question of the police, do we support the police or oppose the police? That has become an important political question back home. The debate over abolishing the police is sadly and astonishingly to me a real debate in today's Democratic Party because there are multiple elected Democrats who vocally embrace abolishing the police. It's not just at the local level. It's not just the mayor of New York City. It's not just the mayor of Minneapolis. It's not just the mayor of Portland that advocate abolishing the police. Sadly, it is now senior officials at the U.S. Department of Justice, the number 2 official at the Department of Justice, and the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. Both are among the leading advocates in the country for abolishing the police. Both, in writing, repeatedly and emphatically advocated for abolishing the police last year. 1 year ago in writing, they advocated abolishing the police. Now, every Democratic member of this committee maintains, oh, no, I don't support abolishing the police. At the same time, every single Democrat in the United States Senate voted to confirm not 1 but 2 senior officials at the U.S. Department of Justice who are among the leading advocates of abolishing the police. And now we get a third time where, listen, our votes have consequences. By the way, I voted hell no on both of them because I think abolishing the police is insanity, and I'm emphatically against it. That's an easy vote, and I'm very comfortable telling the people of Texas why I cast that vote. Now we have the nomination of Ms. Rollins. I'll confess, a week ago I had no idea who Rachel Rollins was. I'd never heard of her, never encountered her. Then I looked at her record, and it takes your breath away. We're dealing with an individual nominated to be a U.S. attorney in Massachusetts who has been vocal and aggressive against prosecuting crime. Look, part of abolishing police is getting rid of the men and women in blue that keep us safe. Another part of abolishing police is telling prosecutors, you no longer prosecute crimes. We're not in the crime business anymore. In other words, we, the government, almost always, and in fact, I'll take out the almost always Democrats, say, given a choice between a violent criminal and an innocent citizen, we, the Democrats, choose the violent criminal. You may say, surely that is hyperbole. No one would be crazy for someone who meets that description to be the U.S. attorney. Well, let's look at her record. First of all, Ms. Rollins, in February, she was very candid that she came into the job of DA as a crusader. Here's what she said, quote, if you want to change the criminal legal system, become a prosecutor. Why? She explains why. Because you have, quote, the power to determine charges and what crimes to decline to prosecute. So that's what Ms. Rollins tells you matters about a prosecutor, the power to say, I won't prosecute these crimes. Well, surely she exercised it with reason and restraint. That's what our Democratic colleagues on this committee are suggesting. Well, let's look in writing, and I will say this document It is entitled Appendix C, SCDAO, Declination and Diversion Policy. Boy, what an incredibly boring title, designed to mask a horrific policy. I would encourage anyone, look, if you're watching this at home, and let's assume you have political leanings. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you're inclined to believe the Republicans on this. If you're a Democrat, you're inclined to believe the Democrats on this. Let me suggest something to you. Go read this document. I'll tweet out this document. Just read it. Read it yourself and then ask who's telling the truth. Because for all the Democrats saying, no, what do you mean she won't prosecute crimes? Let me read from the document she prepared. Charges on the list of 15 should be declined or dismissed pre-arraignment, so even before the proceedings start, without conditions. So we're not even going to put any conditions on it. No matter what, just throw it out. We don't want to see these cases. And in fact, the next sentence says the presumption is the charges that fall into this category should always be denied. Always. So no wiggle room of, just in some cases. Always is what she wrote, even when attached to another charge. So if you have a multiple criminal, we just throw out these crimes. Basically, this is the prosecutor saying, I'm the legislature. Those pesky elected legislators that actually voted on the criminal code, I don't care what they say. I am erasing these crimes from the criminal code. Okay, let's see. Listen, there's some dumb laws. Maybe what she's erasing, I'll tell you, in Texas, it is still, I believe, a crime. Senator Cornyn may be able to confirm it, to carry wire cutters in your pocket unless they protrude 3 inches or more. Now, that actually goes back to the days of cattle rustling. If you had a prosecutor who says, all right, we're not going to have an aggressive wire cutter in the pocket carrying prosecution unit, I'd be good with that. So maybe the categories of crimes that she says are no longer crimes in my jurisdiction, maybe they're that kind of thing, the stupid things. Well, let's start. What's the first one on the list? Trespass. Okay, I want everyone to think about this. And by the way, what's interesting is this is not just in red states. I want the people of Delaware to think about this. The people of Connecticut, the people of Hawaii, the people of California or Georgia. Do you want laws against trespass enforced in your community? Well, according to this individual that the Democrats want to make the top federal prosecutor in the state of Massachusetts, trespass is no longer against the law. Someone comes into your house, onto your property, no biggie, ain't a crime anymore. All right, what else isn't a crime? Shoplifting. All of us have seen the videos, I think exclusively in Democratic cities, of shoplifters brazenly breaking into stores and stealing and running out. And why do they do it? They do it, for example, in San Francisco, because you have a prosecutor there who won't prosecute them. So you know what? Hey, I like stores where the price of everything is zero. That'd be a pretty amazing thing. Not very good for the stores, not very good for the community. But this prosecutor says there is no shoplifting. Now, if you want to steal a bunch of stuff, this is your person. If you're actually a small business owner, if you'd like to not have it open season on people breaking into your store and stealing everything in it, that might concern you. What else? Larceny. Larceny is not a crime. Remember, she said these should always be declined to be prosecuted. Larceny is on the list. What else is on the list? Disorderly conduct disturbing the police. So let me ask you, and the amazing thing is, even in blue states, in Minnesota, I promise you there are a lot of moms that are not eager to discover that if someone is drunk and screaming and trespassing on their front lawn and urinating and defecating on their front lawn in front of their children and cursing at their kids, that, hey, according to the Democrats, not a crime, won't be prosecuted, and by the way, when that person comes back to your front lawn tomorrow and does it again, it's not a crime tomorrow either. Remember, always decline to prosecute it. So disorderly conduct is apparently not a crime. What else? Receiving stolen property. So it's good news. At least she's analytically complete. The shoplifters can steal everything in the store. They can take it to the fence, and the fence can then take everything in the store. If you believe that theft doesn't matter, that's a great idea. If you believe in actually enforcing the law, That's insane. What else is not a crime under the lawless administration of this supposed district attorney? Driving with a suspended license. Well, listen, that sounds pretty mild. I mean, a suspended license, that's a technical thing, right? What's the most common area typically where people lose their license? For driving drunk. Or do you get your license suspended when you drive drunk? So if driving with a suspended license is not a crime, then apparently it is open season for people who've had their license suspended because they're repeat drunks because they endanger the safety of innocent people, of children. They get in a car and drive, they get pulled over, you don't have a license. Hey, no problem, keep on driving. Let us know when you kill someone when you're drunk next time. What else is not a crime, according to this radical? B&E, which all of us who watch Law & Order knows that stands for breaking and entering, into a vacant property to sleep or escape the cold. Okay, that sounds kind of reasonable. All right, a vacant lot, it's cold, you're going there. All right, that actually on the list, you can understand the reasoning. If it's cold, you're breaking into a vacant lot. It's vacant, there's not anyone there to be hurt. You can understand that one. And at least she has the good sense to say it's got to be vacant, because that way no innocent people will be hurt, right? Well, what's the next one on the list? B&E into a non-vacant property to sleep or escape the cold. Well, what's a non-vacant property? Like, I don't know, your home? So apparently what she's saying is if it's cold outside, it is no longer a crime for somebody to break into your home, so they can trespass on your property. They can break into your home, they can commit larceny, and apparently sleep in your living room. Now, I want each of you to imagine, look, there's an element of how would you answer one of your constituents if someone is doing this? And the answer from the prosecutor is, we will always dismiss the case. What else won't she prosecute? Wanton or malicious destruction of property. I don't know about you, but wanton and malicious are typically pretty bad. Ain't a crime under her. What else? You could say, well, at least none of these are violent, right? Well, breaking into a non-vacant property, that has the potential for violence. You know what else is not a crime? Threats. You can make a direct threat. You can threaten innocent people. You can threaten children. You could commit threats. Not a crime. What else is not a crime? Minor in possession of alcohol. Kids apparently drink like crazy guys. Party when you got it. What else is not a crime? It's not just alcohol. Okay, you got kids with beer. All right, that's not the first time that's ever happened. Well, marijuana possession of marijuana paraphernalia. Okay, you've got some recreational pot. There's some jurisdictions that have legalized that. Understand that. Well, but it's just the users, right? It's the low-level guys. Nope. What's the next one they don't prosecute? Possession with intent to distribute. So if you're a drug dealer, get yourself to Massachusetts. You know, it used to be that you had to pay off a prosecutor and have a corrupt prosecutor on the payroll to get out of jail. Now you've got someone who's just openly saying, drug dealers, come to Massachusetts because we don't prosecute people for possession with intent to distribute. And by the way, you might say, well, it's just marijuana. There are a lot of places that say marijuana is not too bad. Well, what's the next one on the list? Non-marijuana drug possession. So, could be pot, could be, I haven't studied the details of that crime, but I'm assuming non-marijuana drug possession includes heroin, includes crack, includes cocaine, includes fentanyl, PCP, LSD, all of those. Hey, if you got kids, a lot of us on this committee have kids, I don't know, I would be kind of dismayed by a prosecutor who says if there's a drug dealer in my kid's school with a backpack full of fentanyl, selling it to other kids, we're not going to prosecute him. But apparently the Democrats on this committee are not dismayed. And by the way, on the question of do you support cops or not, the last one on this list is really incredibly revealing. Resisting arrest. Police officer goes, confronts someone who's violent. They're violent. They engage with them. They resist arrest. What's the prosecutor say? Man, it really stinks to be you. I'm sorry you chose to be a cop. but it's open season. Apparently, resisting arrest is now the standard way of interacting with the police in Massachusetts. This is lunacy. And by the way, to make clear that her policy of not prosecuting anything is consistent with her advocacy of abolishing the police, here's what she said at an earlier public gathering. Rollins also spoke about the much-discussed concept of defunding the police. Okay, let's find out. Where is she on defunding the police? She said that defund is not the verb she would use. Okay, that's good. I'm sure every Democratic talking point is going to take that portion of the statement. She wouldn't use the verb defund, but rather reimagine, okay, reimagine may be good, may be bad, hard to tell, or reallocate. Now, anyone who knows anything about defund means take the money out of, get away their funding. Reallocate means take the money away, get away their funding. And she explains, she elaborates on this. I think we're asking the police to do far too much. I think we can reimagine and reallocate some funding, take money away from the cops. Those are her views, and I'll give you, to have a sense of just how extreme this nominee is, I want to point to Art Acevedo. Senator Cornyn knows Art Acevedo. He used to be the chief of police in Austin. He used to be the chief of police in Houston. He's now in Miami. Art is a Democrat. He is a partisan Democrat. Art is an ambitious partisan Democrat. He has his eyes on higher office. No one has ever missed that about Art. Art is now the president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association. I've had a lot of disagreements with Art Acevedo. Here's what liberal Democrat Art Acevedo says about Rachel Rollins. Quote, people like Ms. Rollins are, quote, going so far that we're putting the criminal and their interest in front of the victim's interest. So I started these remarks by saying transparency matters. I assume moments from now we're going to vote, and we're going to have a party line vote, and every Democrat just going to go ahead and vote for this candidate. You're not going to have listened to anything the Republicans have said, and then you're going to go tell your constituents, what do you mean? I don't support abolishing the police. Well, transparency matters. You now know her record. If you believe that we should actually prosecute crimes, if you believe that people shouldn't trespass on your property at home, shouldn't be able to break into your home, shouldn't be able to shoplift, shouldn't be able to resist arrest, shouldn't be able to commit threats, and have someone who is ostensibly the prosecutor immunize them and allow that conduct, then there's only one thing to do, which is vote. And let me say, I find it amusing we're having an argument about whether this is a roll call vote or not. I agree it should be a voice vote, and we should unanimously reject this nominee. That would be, if we were in the land of reason, that's what we would do. But we're instead in partisan polarization, and so every Democrat will happily, like Pravda, vote aye, and then pretend you didn't. But facts are stubborn things, and anyone who reads this document knows exactly what kind of radical this prosecutor is.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Blumenthal, may we take the roll call vote?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I'll put my
Favorably
statement
reporting the nomination of Rachel Rollins to be U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy. Aye. Ms. Feinstein. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Coons. Aye. Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Corona. Mr. Booker. Aye. Mr. Padilla. Aye. Mr. Ossoff. Aye. Mr. Grassley. No. Mr. Graham. No by proxy. Mr. Cornyn. No. Mr. Lee. No by proxy. Mr. Cruz. No. Mr. Sass. No by proxy. Mr. Hawley. No. Mr. Koch. No. Mr. Kennedy. No by proxy. Mr. Tillis. I got his proxy here, no by proxy. Ms. Blackburn. Also, I got her proxy, no by proxy. Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, on this vote, The ayes are 11, the nays are 11.
The committee has recorded a tie vote on Ms. Rollins' nomination to be U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts. Pursuant to Section 3, Section 1A of the Senate Resolution 27 of the 117th Congress, I will transmit to the Secretary of the Senate a notice of this tie vote. Under Section 3, subsection 1B of that resolution, either the majority or minority leader may then make a motion to discharge the nomination. Does any senator seek recognition? If not, the committee stands adjourned.